There we are. We are live and recording. Hi and welcome everybody to the SUSE QE Tools workshop. Today, this is a bit of a little bit delayed session for the roadmap presentation, and I can share what we did within the past 2 months. We had the last roadmap presentation in February, 6th of February. Since then, a lot of interesting things and maybe also some surprises have happened. We have managed to resolve 250 tickets within that time scope, within the combined teams of QE Dev and QE Infra. Multiple issues in infrastructure, a lot in the OpenQA project itself. If we take a look on the second page, we have some OpenQA test contributions like Odin's Distri Open QA and similar. Then also in the generic QA project, and some, even though this is not that big of a portion, some SUSE internal issues. Let's start with the first, which is OpenQA infrastructure. As usual, this is a bit more red because, in the infrastructure, there's a big higher portion of reactive tasking. And what we see, if we are looking for certain groups, there are certain specific issues here, which are, I don't want to go into detail, but something that is reappearing is mentions of HTTP errors 502. And this is a topic which we had addressed also in the past, so in the last reporting period, but that also means that we got a bit more sensitive for the topic and we want to diligently handle all cases and also distinguish all different cases. So we had 502 errors on OSD, which is the SUSE internal main OpenQA instance. There, of course, it's not like external bot scraping or AI traffic, and still we see that issue, but that also means we need to find different special mitigations, and here mostly this is a sign of scalability issues, because what we see, especially over the years, but especially in the past months, is that the overall load on OpenQA SUSE DE increases, so there are more users, more products, more tests, more variants, and that is all causing a higher load. And while we want to keep a responsive system, we want to be able to work on more tests. There is, like, usually every day a question like, hi, why is my test XYZ not executed? And then usually the answer is, well, because there are so many tests scheduled. So there are multiple factors that need to be addressed. One is that tests are executed within a reasonable time of expectation, which depends on multiple factors, like for which worker class, which specific test characteristics did one scheduled test, but also independent of the number of scheduled tests. When there is just a high load and a longer backlog of tests, we want to make sure that the system is responsive and able to actually cope with the load independent of the actual waiting or execution time. So that's also why we have OSD deployment itself taking longer. Then we have 03, 502 issues, which can be related to what we observed in before, but is also maybe a consequence of us trying to actually fix and address the issue. We did have some performance improvements. So if we can demonstrate that, the main index page of an OpenQA instance, it still takes some time, but you can see that this is again more snappy. In the meantime, there was some error, some warning pop up here that the jobs which are used for evaluation is limited. Now what we did implement is one feature that we can exclude certain job groups for the computation done for this index page, for this dashboard. So if, for example, there's we had a job group which is used for automatic investigation jobs, which is quite big because depending on how many jobs fail, this can trigger a lot of jobs that all appear in the same build, and computing that and showing that on the index page can then take significant time, even lead into some timeout issues. There is a new feature, so you now can click a box, ignore on dashboard. Actually, parallel to that, there's also the possibility to ignore special job groups by configuration, which is also the case here. So this job group is also not evaluated for the dashboard, and I don't think anybody would miss that. So if you have any job group in mind where you think like, yeah, it doesn't need to be computed for the dashboard, go ahead, click this box. Let's see what else could be interesting. So something like outdated tests, queue too big, so all a sign of the same group of scalability. When we say there is just a big backlog of tests executed and how we are coping with that. There's also the ongoing story of upgrading to a current operating system base where our stable infrastructure ran for the last years on Leap 15.6, and now we are in the process of upgrading that to Leap 16.0. For example, for O3, I think all the workers are meanwhile upgraded to Leap 16.0. Next is the web UI, and next after that is OpenQA SUSE QE. But you can also see that we even have mentions of 15.5, like the kind of old stable version, which is still a thing, in particular for actually end of life IBM Power machines, which we still have because the tests rely on that for the old legacy products which are in maintenance, and legacy products are not supported on the newer Power PC machines. So this is why we need to keep hardware and software in sync a bit. More 502s here, more upgrade. Just yesterday, one thing is that there's one feature which I will show later, which is now checking available storage space on OpenQA workers when executing, and if the available storage space is less than the sum of the assigned space during job creation, then the job now explicitly aborts and incompletes with a clear message that there are not enough resources on that worker. And this third feature helps to prevent that one OpenQA job can also influence others which are not big and causing confusing out of space issues. As a consequence, of course, some OpenQA jobs that for good reason have high requirements on storage space are incompleted, and what we need to do is handle that by, well, what we can do to handle that is to prevent such incompletes is to say that, well, we can only schedule such jobs on the hardware that is actually able to provide the necessary storage space. And what the approach is that we try to do so that we can still run a high amount of worker instances. The old approach was to say like, well, we will take the minimum of worker instances running on one worker host so that we never run out of any of the resources, be it CPU, IO rate, storage space, or memory. But then this means that this also very much would limit the use of the machines by the minimum. And what we do since, I guess, 2 years is that we try to use the maximum amount of worker instances, because in case of we have a lot of tiny jobs, then we can just run them all in parallel and be much quicker to finish the test. But we can still distinguish based on the size or the requirements of the jobs with what we call a size class. So this is why just yesterday I reordered the size classes that we have on OpenQA SUSE DE workers so that we actually have less instances of large on workers which do not have that much storage and still the high amount on the workers which actually have the storage space available. So that's it for the infrastructure project. Let's take a look into OpenQA. Let's see what could be interesting. Increase upload chunk size. So yeah, so what we found is, as I stated, a lot of scalability limits both on the workers as well as on the central web UI. And what we were looking next to the workers, what I mentioned before, is also into the web UI so that we're actually able to cope with more tests and work on them within reasonable time. And one of the things that we found is that we can actually tweak the numbers of how we do uploading of results while an OpenGate job is running, and especially at time of completion, it uploads results to central web UI from multiple jobs in parallel. And there we had an upload chunk size, which was rather low. So we found that if we can increase that, we're actually making more efficient use of the available bandwidth. And this is shifting the bottleneck from CPU processing overhead to I/O rate. We are looking into what some QA engineers in particular at SUSE call this, the major pain points, which is test review and related features. What I'm trying to be more aware of is any kind of smaller annoyances in the daily work. So when somebody in our internal chat system says like, what is not working well, or if they have a question, or if I observe that maybe somebody is writing seemingly duplicated comments on OpenQA, then I'm asking the question like, why do you see that as necessary? Because I expect that OpenQA features would not need that much tedious manual work. And it turned out that there are some corner cases like the combination of flag carryover and label force result, which actually didn't work. And did that be fixed? And also then there are also repeatedly cases where we are just checking, does OpenGA actually work as it is documented and as it promises? So sometimes I'm also a bit more on the side of questioning the current behavior. In some cases, it turns out we have issues. In some cases, it turns out everything actually works as it should, and we can move on, but we are still explicitly cross-checking that. We have clean, separate OpenGate job history for independent PRs with custom sorting parameters. So there is a problem for years in the design that if you take a look at a page like this and similar here on the job and next privilege page, what we do here is we test pull requests on Gitty, which each relate to one submission for maintenance. And those submissions actually don't have anything to do with each other, so it's wrong, conceptually wrong, to show them in one history as if one build for pull request 3225, which might be about package Firefox, would be consecutive to a pull request which might be about the Linux kernel. And this is not only like a visual glitch, but also has quite some impact on how one can automatically make any automatic deductions. So, we have automatic investigation in OpenQA on multiple levels. And uh, if we would take a look into one job failure and say like, but the last build was good, and actually the last build is something about a completely different package, that would lead to wrong analysis. So we need to fix that so that we are actually able to help with improving the test result review, regardless if it is manual review or automated review. And this was a spike solution, so trying to find a proper way how that could be done. And based on that, I implemented a change already for the product development staging pull requests. So for SLE 16.1, and for other cases like the SLE maintenance test, this is still unsolved, which is actually like a topic which I brought up already many years ago and still not fixed yet. But now at least we have a better reference case where it already works, so we can build on top of that in the upcoming time. Heiko.
Oliver, could you, like in one word, just explain what is the solution, like the time box solution?
Yes, the solution is to use an um, a different hold on, a different version, right? Because what we do here is we put everything together where we say SLE is the same, 16.1 is the same, the flavor is the same, the architecture is the same, and the test is the same. So one of those parameters needs to be distinguished. And I chose the version flag, because with the version flag we can still need to find the test schedule, like for which tests for which parameters should we schedule tests. And we can use the version field, because for version we can put in a placeholder with a star and then can still trigger tests. So instead of 16.1, we say pull request we say 16.1 pull request 3128, and then this is making it a unique version. Make sense?
Yes, but
Sorry, that was more than one word.
yeah, but you're not, let's say, looking into the, let's say, the details of the stagings, like package list or stuff, to make a name from it.
Well, we are looking into the details when we trigger tests. So we read out parameters from the pull request. What we use right now is only the pull request. We could go deeper, but there's implications on performance if we pass much more data for every submission. That's what we try to do with product increments and kernel live patches, and this is very computationally demanding. So we actually need to be aware of how we can scale that, so that we are not every minute parsing megabytes of XML files and log files to find out details about each
Yeah, I get your
submission.
point. So I was hoping that when you mentioned that when you have two neighboring pull requests with completely different content, people with the new solution could maybe do some educated guessing on what is part of the staging on. So if it even makes sense to look at them like in comparison or something.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I see the problem that we have now with the XML.
Yeah, so what could be done is like on request later, make it more convenient for test reviewers to find this information, because then it would only be like when you click on it, not at the time of triggering. That's something that we can consider.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And then actually, on a similar story, link to latest job initiator should allow filtering by result. That is also related. So what we found is that in OpenQA we also had the same problem, and there was actually one feature missing, that in the latest we couldn't distinguish those scenarios. So also there it was intermixed, and then this link to latest didn't exactly show that. And we wanted to combine that to filter by result, so that we can say, show me the latest failed. And we can use the latest route, and then we have all those parameters like this architecture, this version, and so on. And then we can say result failed, and my browser even remembers this this URL here. So we can see failed, and now this is pointing to this older commit, which is the last failed in this scenario. Something like those links with the dynamic content behind can also be used to build much more customized dashboards, because this link never changes, and you can always show like the latest, failed, or passed for any certain scenario that you care about. Next, improve responsiveness of tabs in job view size. I mentioned before something about scalability, and here the problem was that also for individual jobs, when there are a lot of results, one could actually not, like your browser was stuck trying to render that page, and maybe you're not interested in all those little screenshots and details, and you couldn't even switch away. And this is now fixed, so you can see that while details is loading, you can go to a different tab. So let's see what else. Oh yeah, right. The throttling. So again, related to the scalability, to be able to actually work on all those different kind of products and how they are competing with the available resources. We found that there are sometimes rather heavy jobs that block the execution of many small ones. So it's we implemented multiple features to ensure fair use of the available resource based on test parameters, impacting the priority of scheduled jobs. So with that, what one can see is that there are many more priority numbers, which are, not just even somewhere in the middle, but you can see like 48, and you also have an explanation like where does that come from. For example, this job is considered a small job, so this is why it's actually being prioritized and preferred. You can see that chemo RAM is below the default, and this is why this job can actually be executed first, which to me makes sense because this is a rather small job in the product development staging test, so sure, why not do that? In contrast, the next one is 160. Why is that? That is because in this job scenario, the max job time was set to 14,400, meaning that somebody decided like, sometimes that job takes even longer than the default of 2 hours, 4 hours. So that would really occupy a slot for very long. That means that we are prioritizing all smaller and quicker jobs before those. But keep in mind that the priority only affects how we order within the scheduled table. It means like if there are free resources, then still those are executed as quickly as possible. While we are on that page, you can also see multiple other factors. For example, it says limited by server config. That's actually like a visual bug because with 58 jobs, it is not right now limited by the server config, but it is rather limited by you can see that from those 19 scheduled jobs, 18 are blocked by other jobs. So those jobs are simply not executed because they're waiting for another job to finish, not because there are no free resources. What we have also implemented is dynamic load-based adjustment of the global job limit. This is actually the reason why we have this visual bug here, which I plan to fix in the upcoming weeks, is that because functionally we still have a big improvement. And we can see that on let me show the metrics page for O3, and a similar situation is for OSD. So let me show you here in the old, previously what we have seen is just taking a look at running jobs, that running would very often be bound to 170 jobs. That was the limit that we could accommodate, like up to 170 jobs in parallel for a time. And now, since some weeks now, we can dynamically scale up if there are free resources. So what you can see here is that O3, especially during like the night, whenever the night is in our global world, we can scale up and say, okay, we can run many more tests in parallel. And then as soon as the load on the system increases again, which does happen because some jobs finish and they upload their results, then we scale down the limit again. And that means that we can work on, those schedule storms, or, well, okay, maybe it's not a schedule storm here. It's only 1,000 jobs. If we would compare that to OpenQA SUSE DE, on OpenQA SUSE DE, it's like 10 times, 30 times bigger. This is like a new tumbleweed snapshot, and then we are able to work on that much quicker. What else? Privacy policy published. Right. So we do have a privacy policy now, which is actually a requirement if we want to propagate the use of something like the MCP endpoint for LLM connections of OpenQA. So if there's a link here, privacy policy declaring how OpenQA is actually processing any data of individuals. Prevent OpenQA depleting storage with new OpenQA jobs. So again, scalability. Next to running many jobs, one can consider that, well, eventually this will also fill up available storage space. And what we have implemented now is that if the storage space is like near a certain threshold, by default that's 5%. If less of 5% of the available storage space for the main OpenQA API is free, then OpenQA will not execute any new tests. You can schedule many more. They will be entered into the database. The storage needed for that is not really significant, but executing tests and saving all those results might exhaust available storage, and we prevent that from happening. So jobs will stay scheduled until this situation is mitigated. Combined and clickable test overview buttons. Okay, this is becoming old, but if we haven't shown that yet, then why not? Very quick to show. Going to the test overview page, for example, on Tumbleweed. Now there's a bit more color here, and you can actually immediately click on those to filter. So for example, click on failed, only shows failed. Click on all, and you can go back all. This actually updates the filter box. So if you want to play around in here, there are also many more buttons. You can like turn this around and show anything but failed, or maybe show anything but passed, and you can select all here, or you can use this this meta results here, say like everything which is not okay, so anything that needs handling in a review next to the already existing to-do checkbox can be done, or checking for explicit job states. Yeah, and then some necessary upgrades. So for example, you can actually see some visual impact. So the icons look a bit different now because what we did is we switched from the deprecated and obsolete fork awesome project to font awesome free. So for example, those Git branch icons now look a little bit different, but there's like a functional equivalent for all of those. One more thing that shows up here is visualization of the number of retry jobs. So how many times a scenario was already restarted. You can see that here and also in the link of the next and previous results. You can already see that here. That's the same information that was already there for a longer time here, but making that apparent also in this visual way on the test overview page, prevents you from just clicking the restart button when maybe you already know, like, okay, maybe it was already tried to be restarted, and just clicking the hammer the retry button doesn't make it green. Cover code. You can see that there are a lot of cover code sections here, and what we actually managed to do, and I'm happy that we finally accomplished that. In OS order inst, we already had for a longer time ensured full statement coverage. That means you can see here in the batch 100%. That means that every single line of code is actually also covered by automated tests, and that is actually making the review of any contributions much easier, because then we can just trust that at least every line of code was actually executed in tests. And that allows faster development and also much easier review of any external contributions. And now we finally accomplished the same for OpenQA. So you can see that we have those batches showing that CodeCarve is at 100%. And this is actually automatically ensured. So we have CodeCarve, which is still showing those old limits. And there's an open pull request, ensure full statement coverage by me. This is just waiting for ever pending OBS checks, which seem to take long, I guess. We can simplify that and just say, like, well, we know that the whole project is fully covered. Test result batches for builds. Jesus, features don't stop here. So we had in before this nice feature developed by Santi. Hi, Santi. The batch for individual test scenarios, and now we have that as well for complete builds. So you can point to a complete build and have the aggregated result. So for example, when we go back to the overview page, like from Tumbleweed, select this latest build, then we can just add a /batch, and there you have a batch. And if you want to add a custom label, then you can also do that. And of course, one can adjust the query URL to say always point to the latest build, or even if for any reason you only want to reference the like a subset of results, well, you can even do that and just like show the past or whatever. And with that, this is like really easy to include in custom markdown documents. As you have seen, we are using the batch for individual jobs already here to point to latest job, and you can just use the same to build overviews. And actually, this is also what I'm doing. It just depends on if I can actually find the feature. Let's see. So comment and product increments request pointing to OpenGate test results, and this I'm grouping here. related features. So QMBot is used for more and more workflows. And what we finally managed to pull off is that QMBot writes a proper comment not only when it can approve, but also when it can not approve, like if there are any blocking test failures. And we have comments in GTPRs pointing to those test results, which is leveraging those new build badges. Let me show you one example. Hold on. If the system allows me to authenticate, maybe I cannot show you the example. That's why it's always good to have screenshots prepared. Let's see, where do I have screenshots? I should have screenshots in the pull request, I guess. Well, I can show you screenshots of how it looks like currently in OBS, which is not perfect. I mean, it functionally works, but it's just not nicely rendering that. So what we need to learn is how one can actually use proper formats that is accepted by OBS. Still, the link itself would work. For how it looks like in QEMBot, let me show pull request. We have enable comments here. Job group details. Unfortunately, here also not well. Okay. So what I'm doing is, what we are doing is we are rendering a table, and in that table we are using build badges. So you can imagine that for each of those links you have a badge which is showing like failed or soft failed or incomplete or still running. And actually we are also using available information in group overview properties from OpenGA, where already some job groups follow the same format. We have that done on OpenGA OpenSUSE.org properly, where it mentions a responsible person or responsible team. And partially that is also done in OpenGA SUSE. So you can see this is like the QYAM team on their job group. They are using the format. They have provided proper contact information, means it can be read out. There's a fallback contact if that isn't provided. And with that, we have feedback like if a submission is blocked, what it is blocked by, and actually who would be able to help in the specific domains to push to bring that forward. So let's clean up a bit. Ignore jobs. Yeah. Okay, fine. This was a rather long section about what we have achieved, but there are a lot of interesting things that we have achieved. Any questions about that before we go into the roadmap for the upcoming period? Then let's look into where we are with the plan. Starting from top level, this I think should be unchanged since the last time. We have 3 sagas which govern our main work in the prioritization. We have support switch to GT for OpenSUSE SUSE-based products, for example, 16. The examples which I mentioned about commenting based on QMBot is related to that saga. Else, full traceability, paper trail, and test reproducibility. Well, all of the recent scalability work actually would fall into that saga because we want to keep an archive and be able to fully provide paper trail for, in particular, sleep maintenance tests that had been conducted for a period of, let's say, 1-2 years. To be able to do that, we store more results, we run more tests, we keep more data, we fill up more storage. We need to prevent the storage to be exhausted. We need to more efficiently clean it up. We need to be able to still provide a reasonable responsive UI while being able to store much more data and all those points. And then still there's a support SUSE Proc Office move. This is not that much effort because mostly this is serialized work, like one thing after another, has a lot of external dependencies with other parties within SUSE. So it is unfortunately dragging on for rather long and annoyingly still not finished, but also it's not that much work in comparison. Still, so let's take a look there. What do we have planned? We have some more open tasks, which is to, well, some cleanup and consolidation, fixing VLAN names, because during the migration work, this has introduced some, inconsistent setup, which is consistently causing confusion, like why is a machine in this network be able to access certain services and in another network it is not, or is it even in a different network, and all that. Also, we want to have automated machine network configuration validity checks because of those problems. What we have already accomplished recently is that, with all those machines moving around and being much more remote and separate and responsibilities distributed over the organization, it can happen that, maybe a server is running for very long and it wouldn't be realized. What we have now is automated checks reading out the measurement data from the power distribution units so that we can check, is a machine actually drawing any power when our inventory system says that it should be in inventory, and vice versa. For the next saga, the full traceability paper trail, what is planned there? So I would say most of the things that we have identified lately regarding scalability are working nicely. Building upon the concept of preventing to deplete storage, we are looking at one storage like the asset storage. We need to extend that concept to prevent depleting any storage, like also results, or vice versa. I don't know the details there. And then, like SUSE specific, we want to have a full reproducibility of sleep maintenance test shown in a Spike solution, which will probably trigger the creation of more tasks so that we can actually make use of the available features and actually have that, available and discoverable, so that, let's say, in 1 year from now, if somebody says, like, we need to look up this iteration of testing at this time of a release of a maintenance update, maybe there was a regression release to customers, or maybe there are other questions, then we would be able to follow certain playbooks and be able to answer those questions. And the third saga about support switch to Gitty. This is now the one with the biggest amount of tasks which are still open. A lot of QEM bot related work, so still a lot of problems, certain corner cases, kernel live patch support, log files becoming too big. The product development staging workflows are not triggering as many tests as we would expect, still needs an integration into updated dashboards maintained by other teams, and so on. After that, because all of those sagas are now coming a bit into the long tail of development, meaning that there are less tasks that can be worked on in parallel. That means to make efficient use of team resources, we need to work on multiple tasks which which are coming from other sagas. So let me extend that to also look into not future, but next. So what comes next are compliance-related improvements in preparation of any new 2026 audit. So, there had been some tasks that were identified already long ago and that need to be followed up with. Then, of course, AI integration, like the still hyped topic, and do more with AI and for UI and using AI. We are doing that. And extended QE infrastructure at SUSE for future-proof product development, meaning caring about the infrastructure, being able to make use of free resources or the new machines where necessary, and also transition resources to something like modern hypervisor solutions. Open platform is one keyword that comes to mind here. Regarding the AI integration with OpenGA, I want to showcase one topic that I recently experimented with a little bit, is that we have the idea to auto-generate a failure hypothesis for not okay jobs. And I can show you how this looks like. So it's actually live on O3, and we have an O3 job, and this one is conducting an LLM analysis by giving these log file content to a local LLM running on O3 workers and coming up with, the prompt is something like, give a 2 to 3 sentence summary of what the issue is about, what would be necessary to do about it, and how likely is this a product regression. So this is meant to be executed automatically if an LLM analysis is enabled and a local server is available, and then can be either shown in logs, which can also be used by automated tools reading out the logs, or also included in job details, which are uploaded as part of a job. Similar to that in, let's see, also against scripts. Oops, sorry. Yep, speak up.
Yeah, quick question. Is the LLM analysis thing enabled for all jobs on Node-3?
Not yet. It's a feature switch. What we did is we enabled it for the OpenQA in OpenQA tests. We will experiment with that, and based on the experience, tweak it, enable it by default, disable it by default, or something. Why do you ask? Do you want to have it or do you want to not have it? I mean, both is possible.
No, I'm just curious at how good is it going to be at identifying issues, for instance, with multi-machine clusters or
Yep.
yeah.
Multi-machine clusters is a good keyword. So right now, what I showed in before, this is like the analysis which is like specific to one job. So this is conducted on the worker by auth audience only for this job. What we do is we also analyze already on the level of OpenGA, incorporating results from multiple jobs when we retrigger, OpenGA investigates, checks the last good test, the last good build. So what we could do there is integrate the LLM analysis, incorporating all those results, including the job history, including other jobs in the build, and including other jobs in the cluster. Okay, so this is where the idea that I had is to integrate it into the auto review hooks, and how it would look like. You can see the example output here, but I can also show you here that we have a comment here, and when we have a comment here, you can see what the LLM states. The issue is widespread within this build, having failed 10 times, but a lack of available diff information prevents confirming if it was present in previous builds. So it already looked at the history. So I had like some fake scenario where I simulated failures consecutively in a row. You can see Celeste says like occurred, so this is not a production scenario. And it looked into the history and said like, yeah, it already failed multiple times, but there was no last good. And then saying something like, should we investigate more or not? My idea is that I know, for example, QE, the public QE public cloud team, they're concerned about triggering OpenK Investigate, which is triggering OpenK test for every single failure which is not reviewed, because it could multiply, and then it turned out like, okay, we have the same issue in the complete build in 200 jobs. Why trigger investigation jobs everywhere, right? My idea is that we would come up with a good automated decision to say, does it make sense to trigger a more costly rerun of OpenK tests, which could possibly run in public cloud or local infrastructure, based on comparing all results in that build, in the history, in the context. Make sense? Okay. Any questions from your side, any wishes, anything you would like to have discussed regarding the roadmap? If not, then let me thank you for your attendance and just point out that what will come next. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So we will skip the next workshop appointment because it would be on the 1st of May, which is commonly public holiday, many areas of around the globe. And after that, on the 15th of May, we will want to focus on the OpenK test review experience. Best practices, open points, improvement ideas based on how is the experience in early 2026, what has changed over the years, what recurs as pain points, what we can do, collecting ideas. Until then, see you and goodbye.